Also, today we have Richard Joy here. Thank you, Richard, for coming. Appreciate it. It was a pleasure. Richard Joy is a London-based author, writer, founder of The Recovering Man. He is a men's coach, author, and speaker in the men's health, personal development, and transformation field. Richard, thank you for coming. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you for
Very
inviting
good.
me. Happy
So
to
you
be
have a
here.
really interesting story, man. A story that can help a lot of people by listening to it, because I think a lot of people are in the same situation or have been in the same situation, and they don't talk to no one. They're afraid. Yeah, they're afraid of coming out, or they're afraid that people might criticize them, even though it's not their fault, right? It's their past, their childhood, their parents, their, I don't know, brothers, neighbors, whatever. But they're afraid. They take it upon them, right? And you've been through that. Talk me through that. Tell me a little about how you started, please.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two things there. First of all, with regards to, there is a fear some people have,
Yeah.
and understandably.
Yeah.
The avenues with which they can talk about things that are going on at the very core of them are limited in this world. But one of the key things about Recovering Man and my story has also been, there's another side to that.
Yeah.
So some people have the issue, and this is probably a bit more popularized in the mainstream media, that men don't like to talk. And that's true with some men.
Yeah.
That's definitely true with some men. But there's a flip side. And this came in my experiences where I started talking, and it's an amazing release once you get it out and you start connecting with people.
Yeah.
But what I found, and the roots of Recovering Man are, that sometimes you can start talking, and that's great for a while, but it doesn't give you that boost and that structure and that framework you need to really develop as a person. And that is really the core of what I do. So I have done a lot of spiritual work, men's work, personal development work, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And what I found over the years of doing that was there were a lot of men who got comfortable talking about their feelings but had no action plan. They had no way forward. They had no idea about a good male role model in their lives. A lot of them never really had a father around, or at least did have a father around, but he was very distant from them.
Yeah.
So Recovering Man in its essence is about, yes, we need to open up and we need to be able to crack that fear or whatever, anxiety of talking. But once we've done that, we've got to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. So we talk about it, we get to the bottom of things, but then we take action. And that's the real core of what I do.
Right. And how this Recovering Men started? Where did the idea came from? And not the idea, because I think is more part of experience rather than just an idea, right?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Midlands, Leicester, and I kind of had a normal childhood till I was about 10 or 11.
Yeah.
You know, pretty bog standard life, 2 parents, elder brother, and really just normal kid, like playing football, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then my parents divorced when I was young. And that is, you know, happens to lots of families nowadays. But at the time, I was kind of happy about that. My dad was slightly overbearing figure. I wasn't particularly angry with him or anything, but it just felt like not having him around wouldn't be that bad. However, it was all right for a year or two. But then as time went on, my elder brother was coming to his teenage years, and he didn't really have that father figure in the house anymore. My dad had moved away. He was working in London. We were in the Midlands. So my elder brother got more and more involved with the wrong types of people. In a way, when I look back, he was looking for that masculine guidance.
Right.
And very often, you see this a lot today, men who don't have that will very often seek out sort of gangs, drugs, things where they can get status. Exactly. Places where they can find a sense of a strong masculine meaning. Now, I think he was doing that subconsciously. So he sought out all the wrong people. And he was this sort of guy who was very well liked, quite popular, quite confident person, but he always wanted to go one better. Now, that's a good thing if you're projecting that in the right way.
Exactly.
But if you're projecting that in the wrong way, it can go very badly, as it did with him. And he got very into drugs, you know, very heavily addicted. We're talking crack, heroin by the time he's 15, serious stuff. And he just got lost in that black hole. And he took a lot of that fear and negative energy that came with that home and became very aggressive in the home towards my mother and me especially. So this guy used to be my hero growing up, and then he became this sort of tyrant in the home, you know, and I was super afraid of him. I didn't really have my dad around, so I became very sheltered in my own way and almost turned off from the world, you know, didn't want to engage with it, didn't trust it. And sort of had a spell of drugs myself, nothing that serious. It was more smoking lots of weed, which can make you quite paranoid, especially when you're young. Yeah, which it did with me. So that led me on to drinking, really, where I was in this really hellish situation, lots of violence at home, no place where I felt safe. So I was smoking the weed for that, but that led to panic attacks. So then I started drinking to stem that. And that went on really for many years. And in many ways, alcohol for me was a good thing. It was like my best friend. It allowed me to do stuff. It allowed me to go and talk to girls. It allowed me to.
But I'll interrupt you a little bit because I've listened to your story, and it's really powerful. I know a lot of people that went through some things like that. My dad was a little bit angry as well because he was drinking as well. But what made you go from let's say marijuana, from weed, from drugs to drinking? Was it what did you feel is going to help you more? Did you try it before, or were you looking for a solution when you changed from weed to drinking?
No, that's a great question, man. And I remember the day specifically. I was at college. I was talking to this girl, and she said to me, what's your plans after college? And I'd never thought about my plans after college. I don't know if this is related, but that was the question she asked me. And then I went in the classroom. I'd smoked a joint that morning. And this panic attack just came over me at college in the classroom. Wow. And I was just going out of my mind. I was thinking, what is going on? Never had a panic attack before. Didn't know what it was. Wow. So I was freaking out. And I just said, I've got to go. So I picked up my bag and left. And I walked home from Leicester to my home, which was 6 miles, because I was just out of my mind, like, what is going on? It was all of this smoking too much weed. It was all of this, the fear that I'd had at home, all these violent situations. Some of it was quite severe. So it all just come out. And I kind of knew that at that point I was lost. I was 17. So I was at an age where you're becoming a man, but it's a very confusing time.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, especially when you don't have guidance. So for me, what I was seeking from the alcohol was security. I was seeking something which would just take the fear away. And alcohol's famous for being an anti-anxiety drug. That's why many people get hooked on it, is because it's very powerful and effective.
Right.
It really works. If you're feeling anxious and you have a few drinks, it can sort you out.
Yeah.
However, that becomes a very dangerous road because you're relying on something outside of yourself, which is very, very dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, and that led me into really drinking on a regular basis to just get through life, you know.
How regular? Like what? How much were you drinking?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it probably wasn't so bad. It was more binge drinking.
Yeah.
So I find that what I do is I'd drink. We'd have like a party like you do when you're young, and I would really drink to excess, and I'd probably just carry on that level of drinking in the evenings through to the week, and then I'd probably stop in the week. But I remember once I was so fearful of the outside world. This is at 17. I had a driving lesson and I had a couple of shots of vodka before a driving lesson. That's at 17, right? So,
wow.
Yeah, right. So it was pretty hardcore. Yeah. However, then I went on to university, and I've heard many people who struggle with a drink say this as well, but when you're drinking excessively and you go off to uni, you can just slip between the cracks. Yeah. Because the drinking culture is just ridiculous. So no one really can tell the difference, you know?
Right. Well, I want to ask you, so in your video, right, you look back at your experience, and you never say like, you know, there were some good things, or you see it as the way it is, right? Yeah, yeah. A lot of people right now, and no, this is a bias we have in mind, right? We look back and you say, well, it wasn't that bad. Yeah, yeah. Even though, like, every single one of us had bad experience, the mind tends to like forget those things and just like, you know, remember the good things, right? Yeah. But you don't want to hide it, right? You could try and hide it, right? Just to feel better, right? For the moment, right? But you don't want to hide it, right? No. how does that, does it empower you to see like, look, man, it was hard, you know, like, look, man, it was really hard, right? It was bad.
Yes,
What
yes.
happened? Does it empower you to like to strive from seeing that to this is where I want to go?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is the essence of it is, and the essence why I try and emphasize the negatives is because it's become the fuel which pushes my life forward now.
Right.
Now, that is the essence of a transformational experience. You
Yeah.
need to have an experience of transformation for that to work in your life.
Right.
So when I look back now, I look back every now and again and think, man, that was screwed up. But it feels like someone else's life a lot of the time.
Is it?
Yeah, you look back and you think, it's just, you can't believe it's you. Some of the
Right.
stupid things you did, crazy amounts you drank, whatever, stupid experiences. And you look back and you think, I can't believe I did all of that. And in a way, I am a big believer in what I call the symbolic death and a rebirth. And I'm a big believer that we can achieve that in our lives.
Explain that.
Right,
Sounds good.
right. So if you don't mind, I'll take a step back and I'll just fly through and I'll show you how
Absolutely,
that happened in my own
absolutely,
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, I was drinking very heavily. That took me through university. So I was drinking very heavily, but I was also very stuck in my head. My perception of the world was that I could work everything out in my mind, reading books,
Right.
self-help, psychology.
Right, yeah.
Although at that point I wasn't really reading self-help, it was more psychology and philosophy because I thought I can work the world out.
Yeah.
Now that was all right at uni, it kind of got me through. You sound clever in front of some
Yeah.
people, but I was just still broken inside, terrified of the world, terrified of women, which led me to watching too much pornography as well,
Right.
which again ups your social anxiety.
We'll touch on that as well.
We'll touch on that, yeah, it's a big issue these days. And then I came out of university, came to London, wanted to be a singer, folk singer. And I was completely idealistic, though. That's the thing. I wasn't really working to it. It was more a mask I could wear and an excuse to not engage with life in many ways. And then my brother died. So my brother took his own life at that point. And I kind of realized that whatever I was going through was very serious because I had similar, not as bad as him, but I had similar issues.
Yeah.
And I went home back to Leicester to be with my mum during obviously a very difficult time. But my resentment towards my older brother was still so strong because of what he'd done to me when I was young that I still couldn't really grieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I had the same towards my father as well. So I went home and I just engaged in more drinking heavier than I'd ever drank. At this point, I was waking up in the morning and drinking, because I just did not want to face a hangover because they become so brutal at that point. So I think at that point, I maybe had my first experience of withdrawals, alcohol withdrawals, which 21 who isn't aware aren't nice at all. It's like, they're like a hangover times 50 and you just, your mind completely freaks out. Your body's shaking. You just feel this sense of impending doom. You feel like you're going to die. It's very extreme. Wow. And it was almost a wake-up call for me. And I thought, I've got to sort my life out. I'm going to end up like my brother, 6 feet under if I'm not careful. So what I did was I invested in all this self-help material.
Yeah.
I thought I need to sort my life out. I read some amazing books. Some looking back, some material that I still cherish to this day. And to an extent, it worked. There was a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It's not very well known, but that one helped me more than any other because the whole principle he says is just do one really simple thing today. So if you want to get fit, do 5 press-ups. But tomorrow you've got to do 6. And then after that you've got to do 7. And the way he explains it is so easy, but by the time you've been doing it for 3 months, you're doing like 500 press-ups a day. So it's incredible way to improve yourself. Yeah. Now, I engaged in that quite heavily, and what it did was it helped me build this persona to go out and deal with the world. I also started reading material about talking to women as well. Oh, wow. So I learned how to present myself in a business context and to women. Oh, wow. Now, this led to a job down in London, half-decent job in the publishing industry. And all this work I'd done around talking to women and understanding sexual dynamics led me to get a nice girlfriend. Right. So in a way, I felt like, maybe I've cracked this. Maybe I've sorted my life out. So I had this nice job. I was using all these techniques I'd learned. So I was working harder than anyone else. The last mile at work is the most lonely, that sort of stuff. And it was working. So I was leaving the office probably 7:30, 8 most nights, getting there 7:30, 8 in the morning. People saw that, so I was getting promoted. There was some issues with the editor-in-chief at the publication I was working for, health issues. And they put me in that role. I was only 27, but they put me in that role because I guess they saw I was working very hard and they thought, well, look, we'll give him a chance and we'll keep looking for someone else. But I was so committed at that point to nailing that job that they ended up giving me the job. I was just working 12-hour days. And for the first time in my life, it was making sense with women as well, because I didn't realize it then, but because I was so focused on my own goals and achieving stuff, women were finally interested in that because I wasn't obsessing over them, wasn't being needy.
Right.
I was kind of had my own goals and aims.
Yeah.
So I started to think, oh, maybe I've figured this out. However, deep down, the real me, the little boy, was still there. It was still wounded. And I was still drinking excessively to keep up this persona, to keep up this sort of hot shot at work who isn't bothered by anything, you know, and to be this guy who was dating this girl who was kind of pretty and I was really into her. But deep down, we were both quite damaged characters and we were trying to almost fix each other, you know, by a relationship, which wasn't a good idea at all.
Wow.
So long story short, this began to pile up and pile up and pile up on the inside, day by day, the grind of going in long days, relationship issues because I wasn't being the man I said I would be when I was drunk and had taken some coke and being the big cock of the walk. But then in the morning when you feel broken, she'd see that, I'd see that. So I was in this place where I was living a lie. You know, I created these personas, these masks, and we all have to do that to an extent. But what was beneath that was still so broken. This went on for 2, maybe 3 years, and it got to the point where I was drinking. Really, come Thursday, I'd go out, big night out with work, start drinking again on Friday at midday, drink all afternoon Friday, wake up Saturday morning, drink in the morning, drink all Saturday night, drink all Sunday. Now, at this point as well, this relationship I was in was on the rocks. So she was always with other guys. I was always sleeping with other women. It was a complete mess. I was being ripped apart by that because I kind of wanted to be with her, but it just couldn't work. And I became a bit obsessive around just trying to get laid all the time.
Wow.
And basically, I just go in on a Monday morning and I just say every Monday, I cannot live like this. I can't do this anymore. I feel so broken. And at that point, I'd probably get to about 10:30 and then I'd wander around the corner and pick up a drink, you know, a little bottle of wine or whatever. And I'd drink that and go back to work. And it sort of fell into that routine. And I knew then there was a problem, but I was so lost. I'd invested all this time in self-help that I just thought, well, I've got nowhere to turn.
Wow.
Luckily, I started seeing this therapist who had experience in this field, and it got to the point where 1 week, really, everything just blew up, and I felt like I just lost my mind. I thought, I can't do this anymore. I'm exploding on the inside. Life's falling apart around me. The girl I was seeing in that relationship had basically left. She was moving countries, and work was a nightmare. Obviously, being editor, and she's very busy. And I was just like, I can't do it anymore. I remember looking in the mirror, and you know, Lord of the Rings, you know, that, you know, Gollum.
Yeah.
I remember, and I thought, I looked like Gollum. Like my hair was all drawn, my skin was all just flaky. And I couldn't even hold my own gaze in the mirror.
Wow.
As a sense of shame and just what has happened to this guy looking back at you. And that was really the lowest point. And I was at that point where I thought, like, you know, start considering suicide and things like that. And I rang this guy who I'd seen, and he said, look, I'm going to get you into this rehab. So I went to a rehab, and it was up in the middle of nowhere, and I was really on a real drinking binge at this point. So I went there, and they detoxed me. They gave me Valium, I think, or something to detox. And that took about 7 to 10 days. And everything in my life had fallen apart. Everything.
Wow.
My mind, my relationship, my job, my inner world, the lot. And I woke up one morning and I came downstairs, and everyone in that rehab wasn't in a good place, as you can imagine. And you used to get your phone, I think it was like an hour a day. And I remember checking my phone, everyone's like, oh God, we're worried about you, is everything all right? And I had the most pure sense of peace I'd ever had in my life. And whatever happened for that to happen is the root of what I do now. So I don't want to sit here and make out that I'm a genius and I can figure this stuff out. There is something that has to happen when we give in that allows a change to take place.
Absolutely.
Because when I was ready to say, I'm screwing my life up, I've fucked it up, I don't know what I'm doing, but I've given in, I've got no pretense anymore. I don't have to pretend that everything about me is brilliant and great.
Exactly.
I don't have to pretend that I'm amazing to this girl. I don't have to pretend that I'm unbeatable at work. I don't have to pretend that I'm not bothered by anything. And I could just let it go. It was almost then that truth came into my life, you know? And that has become the foundation of now what I work in within the transformational space.
Right.
So a lot of the program and the book that I have basically on the screen is very much focused around the symbolic death. So it's a death and a rebirth. It's a letting go of all of these ideas you have of yourself and letting go almost to life itself, if you will. Now, some people might see that as spiritual. Some people might just see that as just the natural process of transformation that happens when you just give in. So that's what happened to me. And as I began to develop from that more, I had this intuitive knowledge that I've got peace inside for the first time in my life. I've never had that before.
Right.
And I'm quite interested in spiritual teachers now because of that experience. I'm not necessarily religious. I'm just interested in what spiritual people say. So I like reading the Buddha. I like reading what Jesus says. And Jesus says this thing where he says faith can be as small as a mustard seed. Now, I'm not saying faith in the Christian way, although obviously nothing wrong with that. People engage in that. But I mean, it just, for me, it really made sense because I thought what he's saying there is what happened to me, where it's this purity and and it was a tiny bit of me that was pure, but I knew intuitively, I've got to protect that.
Wow.
And as I did, I started working more and more on staying sober, working more and more on being honest, working more and more on going into my past and finally letting it all out to people. And that grew, and that grew, and that grew. And I started to then think, well, I can now re-engage with work, but I re-engaged with work with a lot. I wasn't so needy with work anymore. I've got to prove everything. I became a bit more self-respecting. So what I did then was I started freelancing because I saw more value in myself. And at that point, I could charge a day rate, allow me to go out and start my own business.
In that moment, that where you were at the rehab, right? Did you feel you love yourself, or was it like, can you like pinpoint that specific? Was it like, like I love myself, or was it like something external? Like, was it internal or external? Something you've realized, you've noticed, you've seen, you were thinking about it, or it's just like, like I just love myself from now on.
That's a great
I don't
question,
have to prove it anymore.
That's a great question, and this is the real key, of course, as well. So, I wouldn't say there was a moment where I was like, I love myself, and I'll tell you why. Because that implies that my ego was still dominant. So the ego loves and hates, right? What had happened to me was I'd just given in. And when I gave in, I realized there's a deeper reality to life than the ego. Now, like I say, you might call that life itself, you might call it consciousness, you might call it spirit, whatever you want to call it. But it was that. And it was neutral. So it didn't tell me, you're failing here, you're doing rubbish here. It was just neutral. And it kind of showed me that there's something I can rest in, which is beyond what I'm trying to show the world, right? Now, there's, of course, many ways that you can look at that. There's the spiritual ways, there's personal development ways, there's all manner of ways. But I think I'd always viewed life and the world as it's little me in my little brain. I don't really control my body. Bones grow by themselves, skin changes. I don't control that. So I'm the thinker in my mind. That was my identification. But this experience was taking me a step beyond that. So you're even beyond that thinker, because that thinker is the thing that defines who I am to other people in the world. But there's a reality beyond that.
Absolutely.
Now that's the root of what I believe is redeveloping yourself as a man. You've got to get to that space, whatever that means to you. For some people, it might mean, as I say, it might mean a spiritual thing. For others, it might mean just giving yourself to life itself. I do a lot of men's coaching. Some guys I work with have come from a Christian background, some a Buddhist background, some are completely atheist. So it's not a thing about belief as much as just giving yourself over to something. So that can start to power you. Because the reality of life is you're going to love yourself one day and hate yourself the next. That's life. You're going to have knocks, and you need something deeper are more
Technology, yeah.
trustworthy, that you can sink into and be like, all right, I've taken a real knock today. Sometimes you take 10 knocks.
Yeah.
And it can be hard. We've all had times like that where
Oh yeah, of course. There's no
you lose your
question about
job, you lose your,
There's no question about it. Yeah,
right, and
yeah.
it piles up, and you need something that you can sink back into and not take it all personally.
Yeah.
If you take it all personally, that's when you pick up a drink. That's when you start.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter how successful you are either. It's not like it happens for people who don't have money. You know?
Yes, yeah.
It happens. You can have 10 billion, you can have 100 billion. You know, it can happen. I mean, it can happen. It happens because like the guy with 100 billion, he has money invested. So the crash, market can crash. And then you're going to receive the news that market crashed and you lost half of that.
Yeah.
That's a bad news.
Yeah.
Now, you still have half of that. Of course, for people, like poor people, let's say, but he still has money. Of course, but it's still a pain, right? So it doesn't matter where you are, like, it doesn't matter where you are in terms of riches. You will still find that in day to day.
Yeah, I think that's bang on, and I also think there's that point to be made there as well, where maybe not so much in self-help, but you do experience it more in personal transformation work and maybe even spiritual work, where money is almost a dirty word.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with money.
Yeah.
Money's a good thing.
It is.
But it's like basing your life solely on that is the problem.
Yes.
Do you get what I mean? And so therefore, case in point, like you say, when you get people who have 100 billion, money isn't an issue for them anymore, but they still get up and go to work because they're not driven by money.
Yeah.
Like, it's not to say we shouldn't aim to earn more money and aim to be successful. Obviously, that's a good goal in life. But there's a reality, again, beyond that, where we're trying to find something which is giving us meaning, basically.
Yeah.
And that might mean that you earn millions of pounds. It might mean that you earn a wage. But the core is finding what's right for you in your life. And again, working through this process and getting to the very root of you, I believe, will take you to where you need to go.
Absolutely. Can I take you back to the watching porn? It's an interesting subject. I've seen another interview about that. I've seen some people talking about that. I've seen some teachers talking about that, and it's a real problem nowadays, because kids are more and more onto their devices and staying in their room, and that's the only thing they'll do: gaming and porn and drugs or drinking without actually telling no one.
Yes.
And that's a real problem, and that's what I love about your story. You've overcame that. You're safe now, right? So you, like, all of that, what it means. You don't need it. You don't need it. It's not a way to live, because it doesn't make you happy. It makes you happy on the moment, so to speak, right? It feeds that ego. It feeds that, now I need it now. But it's not a way long term.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's good that you've raised this topic because it's such a big issue. And I know from my website that if I do a post on porn, people won't really talk about it, but the traffic tells you.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
guys are always reading it. Yeah. It's like 99% male, and they're always sharing it, and I can see the backlinks, and I can see, the traffic that's flying on it. And it's one of these really interesting things because, we're kind of living in a world where consumption is seen as limitlessly good. And I don't want to demonize porn if someone just watches it once or twice a week and doesn't really have a problem with it. But there is an issue with lots of guys that they're finding where you can over-engage in it quite easily. One of the things I'm quite thankful for when I look back at my early life is I remember the first encounter I had with porn, right? Me and my friends were playing football in a car park. And one of our friends was like, "You're not going to believe this, right?" And he said, "Come and check this out." And we went with him, and he found this car, and the back door was open to this random car, and it had a big box full of porn mags.
Right.
And he just basically opened the door, shut it, and nicked this porn mag. We were only about 11 or something, so it was like this moment where it felt like really naughty what we were doing, and we all scuttled off. And we were looking at this porn mag, and it was the first time I'd seen a woman with like boobs and naked. And I remember, I look back with almost kind of happy I had that experience, because it was, in a way, it's kind of what it's supposed to be like. Yeah. It's like, I remember seeing this naked woman. I was like, wow, like it just stuck with me for months. Yeah. I was like, that's incredible. And and what does it all mean? And like, it wasn't like I started using porn or anything
Yeah,
then,
of
but
course,
it was just, it was innocent.
Yeah.
And I look back to that, and it wasn't really till I was 17, 18 that I came across porn like online. Young lads today, when they're 11, which I think is the average age they see porn, they're getting everything and more, and it's hardcore, and it's completely confusing their view of what sex is. It's too much. And now, like my experiences with pornography is you can fall into a trap, especially if you're socially anxious like I was, where you don't want to engage with women, where it's much easier to stay at home and knock one out, basically.
Yeah.
And you've got all the porn you could ever want, you know, beautiful women, just watch it for hours, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the problem is with that, it doesn't teach you the skills that are going to help you develop in life. Now, like I say, I'm not saying that complete absence with porn is right for everyone, but I just think for lots of guys, they're developing in a world where they don't have to learn the skills to talk to women. They are so vital, because men's interaction with women and the feminine in general is so powerful in helping us become men. Because one of the key things you find when you're trying to date a woman is she doesn't really want to go out with a guy who spends all his time at home jacking off, who's lazy.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So it's like you kind of think like, right, okay, to get a mate, so to speak, in evolutionary terms, I've got to sort myself out.
Yes.
Now that's why you get rejected, and it's hard and it's horrible, but you learn.
That's what we're running from.
Right, you're right. And it's like the more you go through this process, the more you learn, and the more that you're developing, and the more that you're becoming an integrated man. So a lot of that process now has been undone.
Yeah.
And that can trap men in what I call the state of the lost boy. You haven't actualized your masculinity within yourself because you haven't been through those formative experiences. That's just one example with porn. And the other problem with porn, of course, it's a problem in many different dimensions. But I think one of the other key ones to mention quickly is dopamine. There's this guy I know quite well who's a porn recovery coach out in the States, and he is quite close to this chap called Gary Wilson, who does a lot of neuroscience with pornography. What he's found is it's like cocaine, basically. It's like it's doing a line of coke, because the dopamine levels now that you get from it are that strong that you just end up going back for another hit.
Yeah.
And again, it's that creates all manner of social anxieties, personal issues. So while it's not a thing about judging anyone, it's just, I think, opening up to men and saying, look, you know, if you're having an issue with porn, which a lot of men are, you know, let's be honest, most men I speak to, whether it's been in recovery communities, whether it's been in spiritual communities, whether it's been in self-help communities, or whether it's just friends, they've all said to me at one point, like, yeah, I kind of get what you mean. It is a bit like too much at times, you know, I'm kind of losing my way with it a bit.
Right.
So that's why there's a focus on it. And I think the aim of recovering man is to really, there's a reason why it's recovering, not recovered.
Right.
Because I don't want to say to anyone, if you go and watch porn, you're out of this. You know, it's nothing like that. The idea is it's a journey of trying to improve yourself, constantly being open to areas of improvement. And again, it's down to each individual, because for me, I got to that point where I remember I said to myself, I might watch porn, but do I agree with porn? And then I realised I don't actually personally agree with it that much. Yeah. But I'd never been able to think about it.
Right.
Because I always just thought, like, yeah, but every guy does it. It's completely normal. It's great. But when I thought about it, it wasn't for some moral reason I didn't really agree with it. I just thought for personal reasons. I think it limits me. I think it makes me socially anxious. I think it takes a bit of the dynamism away. I think it could get in the way of your relationships with other women.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for me, it became one of these things where you realise, for my own growth as a man, and I think other men out there are finding that they find this too, it just doesn't help. It's not conducive to their personal development.
It actually makes you more go into yourself more, because I mean, you go outside, a normal woman wouldn't do what, you know what I mean? So
yes, well, there's definitely that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So then you get like, oh, why you know, like, even if you maybe don't tell her, right? The two worlds have nothing to do, right? So the one you see with what actually happens, right, has nothing to do. So it can confuse you, right?
Boy, can it?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's really powerful as well. It makes you like not want to interact, and then you have. I mean, I have actually a friend. I haven't kept in touch with him too much. I'm not gonna tell his name here, but
Yeah.
but he's been to kind of like the same thing because he's the only kid to the parents, and they're like, you know, protect him too much, too much, too much. And he's 34 and he's never had a girlfriend. And it's like really because porn was the only way to actually, you know, get out of his own, you know, like or put himself out there, so to speak, right? Because we all have, we find ways, drugs, you know, games or anything to express ourselves, right? So that was his own way, but it's not a good thing, and he's trying right now to go out of that because he realized he's 34. He realized that, you know, man, that's not, you know, that's not life, right? But it's a bit, you know, his story, it's a little bit tricky because whose fault is it? Were his parents? Because like, you know, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. You know, trying to pamper him too much. Is it him? Is it, I don't know. You know what I mean? He still doesn't know that one. You know, I'll definitely put him in touch with you. You know what I mean? But that's one story. So it's like you get into yourself more than outside. And by listening to you, I think this is like. I think this is one way, and I want you to tell me more about what happens, right? So people find you, right? What happens when they get in touch to you, like with you? Don't give me like all the secrets, but tell me like what would be a normal journey? How do you take them? How do you go around that?
Okay. Well, it depends on each individual because
Yeah.
some people will come to you and they're in a state maybe like I was, where they're just on a path where they really want to develop, and you can't stop them.
Yeah.
You know, you can say to them, "I don't have any time," and they'll be like, "Yeah, but okay, I'll come and meet you." You know, you get those sorts of people who obviously it's great to work with people like that. But they're looking for a little bit of guidance, just a little nudging in the right direction and exploring themselves a bit more. The average case is probably something like they have an interest in me and they've picked up the book and they've read the book.
Right.
And then they thought, oh, hang on, some of this I relate to, some of this is quite interesting. And also what I'm very keen to stress in my work is the notion of forgiveness. You know, so it's like we can't really move on and find peace until we forgive those around us. Now, when I went through that whole process myself, that was really when the peace came to a new level, was around forgiveness. So sometimes people will read something like that and they'll think, I've never really thought about that before. What does he mean? So they'll get in touch with me and they might have a problem. They might have a general inquiry. They might just want some self-help advice.
Yeah.
And usually what I'll do, because most of the guys that I work with are in the London-based area, not all are, because we can, obviously these days you can do Zoom and Skype and all sorts, or even on the phone. But in principle, what we do is I have an initial face-to-face meeting, which is completely free.
Yeah.
And it's just a chance for us to get to know each other. Now, I'm also a really big believer in no holds barred truth. And every man has his shadows. Do you know what I mean? We all do.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and we all need someone where we can talk about that. Now, I've been really lucky. I've got a really close friend who's been on me with my own personal development journey. And we're tight. We're really tight. And that is an invaluable relationship in my life, because if I fear anything, if I feel like I've done something a bit wrong, if there's somebody in my past that I just thought, oh, I've never really talked about that, but I don't feel great about.
Yeah.
Recently had this memory come back to me where this poor lad who I grew up with, he was a bit of a, for want of a better word, he was a bit of a geek, you know, and he was always trying to impress our crowd of friends. And not necessarily me, but our group, so a couple of people especially kind of bullied him a bit.
Right.
And I just saw someone who looked like him as I was walking down the street, and it just came back, and I thought, yeah, I feel bad about that. And having someone where you can go and just explore that and be like, because it's bad energy to be carrying around inside yourself and be like, yeah, I don't feel great about that. And then go through the steps, which I go through with someone I'm coaching, and just working through that experience, kind of equalizing the inner karma and then finding peace around it, is just so powerful. So the reason I have that face-to-face meeting is, one, to see if I can genuinely help, because some people have got problems that are serious, and I'm not going to make out that if you've got a full-on crack addiction, come and do a few sessions with me, it's all going to be fixed. I might say you need to go to, you know, NA, AA, therapy, whatever, rehab, sort yourself out, and I'm happy to work with you alongside those things. But I have to be aware of what I can do and where I can help, but also it's so that they can get an idea of who I am, and do they feel comfortable talking with me, and do they feel comfortable sharing everything with me, because there has to be that trust there. They have to know they can say anything to me, however ridiculous, And I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to say, "Oh, that's gross. You're stupid," or anything like
Absolutely,
that.
yeah.
I'm just going to listen non-judgmentally. Be a brother. Be a friend.
Bit, I think.
It's the hardest bit.
That's
Yeah,
it, isn't it?
it is. It's the hardest bit. And I
It's,
think
it's hard to like actually, like, I mean, you have to like look. The pain is there. You know, what am I losing if he's laughing about me? You know, like you have to go through that because otherwise, like you can't like tell everything, and if you don't tell everything, it's not gonna help you.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So it's not, you can't like half.
It's so true.
Yeah,
It's so true.
It doesn't work half.
that's
It doesn't work not even 90%.
Yeah,
It works
yeah.
only
That
100%.
is so true, man. That is so true. And that's exactly what I emphasize to people I work with. It's like, I have the 9-step program, and part of the 9-step program, step 1 is we go through any anger, resentment, fear they have inside. It's a semi-long process. And at the end of it, there's an opportunity to say anything. And I say that, like, you have to go 100% with this because it's not going to work unless you do. If there's anything which you feel, oh, there's that thing I did when I was young, like bullied someone or whatever, and and I just don't want to say it. And I've heard from the most crazy things to the most silly things. And again, it's not about judgment. It's about giving someone that trust and letting them know that we, as men, we build on that level of closeness. It's that building that tribe mentality. And I know with me and my own development, having someone and people now, I'm lucky to have a few people like that who I can talk on that level with. There's something primal about it that you start thinking they're my people. You start thinking of them like you in a way. And that's because you got nothing hidden from them. And in a way, I've worked a lot on, well, what does love mean? It's a real core issue that I've explored a lot because we have sort of sentimental, puppies and kittens and pop songs and all that stuff. But it's something more to it than that. And what I think it really boils down to is selflessness. It's viewing the other as you'd view yourself.
Absolutely.
And wanting the best for them like you want the best for you.
Yeah.
And when you're honest, you can build that. You build that level of closeness. And that can give you a strong sense of security in who you are, but also in the way you act in the world,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You do have to love yourself. It's my point of view. You were talking about your feeling of not love nor hate, right? And we might touch about that later on if we have time. But I think from my point of view, you have to kind of love yourself to be able to let go and be able to love somebody else as well. Because when we look at people and when we look at people who are selfish, let's say, right? It's not that they love themselves more. It's actually they hate themselves. That's like, and I remember I read about this in one article. I don't know exactly which one because I read a lot, but it goes actually against what we all think. Like we think selfish people, they love themselves too much, right? They don't actually. And one more interesting fact that I've listened to and I've heard is that people who have no patience, right? They actually hate themselves. They're insecure. Right? People who have patience is because they think about the other person. Right? Which was like, wow.
No, it's amazing, man. Very deep.
Yeah, it's like so. For example, if you have patience with somebody and give him enough time, it doesn't matter if it's your employee, it doesn't matter if it's colleague, it doesn't matter who he is, right? But if you have patience, it's because somewhere in your mind you're thinking about the other person. I can give him a little bit more time. We all do mistakes. People who don't have, now it might not be true for every single person, right? But that's like the theory behind it, right? People without patience. Have you ever thought about it?
Well, I think that's a really nice way of putting it as well. I mean, I think when you were speaking, what rings true with me, it comes back to that scarcity and abundance mentality. So selfish people tend to have a scarcity mentality. They think there's a limited amount of resources in the world, limited amount of women who are going to like me, limited amount of drugs I can take, whatever it is, and I need to do it now. And I need to maximize what I can get now. And I've been victim of that mentality. I've been victim of that, especially when I was younger. And I still can be, because I think the human mind, when it's fearful, that's what it does. And that's why it's important to try and stay relaxed, to have practices in your life where you can find peace, because the reality of life is, of course, there is enough for everyone.
Yeah.
There really is.
It is,
And
yeah.
if you don't think that, that's a big block for you. It was a big block for me for a long time. Everyone takes all the money.
Yeah.
Everyone has to work down here with the rich people up there. The world's not like that.
Absolutely,
It's not to say everyone's going to be a billionaire.
No, of course not.
But
we don't need to.
Yeah, no, you don't need to. Exactly. You don't need to. But this is the point. It's the scarcity or abundance mentality. And again, I think I see this, one of the most common conversations I have around this, and the patience thing is a really good point. I think that one of the big conversations around the scarcity and abundance mentality is around women. I'll find a guy, usually guys contact me when they've been dumped or a relationship's on the rocks. Yeah, it tends to be a big one. One. And I think, obviously, from an evolutionary perspective, I guess what's happening is subconsciously, they've been with someone and that person's rejected them. So our lizard brain says, she doesn't think you're good enough to reproduce.
Wow.
That's where we go. We might not know it, but that's why it hurts so
Wow.
much, because we're like, ooh, that hurts, right? So they're usually wounded and broken, and they're in that scarcity mentality where they've been like, I finally found someone I like and who like me, and I've screwed it up and it's over. Now, it's so bizarre when you think about it, because these are guys that are saying that to me who are 90% of the time in London. London has got probably 1 million women you can date.
Absolutely.
Half of those are going to be pretty women who you can date. A quarter of those, 250,000, are going to be pretty, kind of successful, interesting women you can date. There's just limitless women that they could meet, but we get stuck in that mindset of thinking, I invested everything in this girl, I'm never going to meet anyone like that again. And it's coming from that place of fear. And so they get completely impatient. And again, naming no names, but I knew a guy once who, I remember I was learning a lot about this, and I was talking to him about this situation he was in where he had one-itis, as they call it, complete obsession with this girl. And he was talking to me like, why is she not messaging me, blah, blah, blah. I really want to be with her. It's not working out. And I was kind of learning the basics at this point. So I said, like, maybe you just need to stand back a bit, just give us some space.
Yeah.
Just go and do your own thing. I know it's really hard, but if you're worrying and you're struggling, you can just talk to me. We can talk about it any time, and I'm there. And something clicked, and he's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then she messaged him, and immediately he was back messaging her straight away, sending the message straight back. And this is the problem that you can get in, is this impatience, and it's because, as you pointed out, it may come from a deeper place where you don't have the trust, security, and love within yourself that you're capable of finding whatever it is you need, and the world can provide it for you.
Yes. We project it in the other. We project it in the other person, and like it's like you throw it and then you want to put it back, like instead of actually have it. Because if I think in a perfect, there are no perfect relationships, but let's say in a perfect relationship, everyone loves each other, like they love themselves first, right? And then from that, like they respect themselves, like they respect each other, right? From their love, they respect each other. And I think that that's where, because if you are in a long relationship, right? So I have 11 years now, right? Like the love that you think, the Hollywood love, right? Let's say, right? It's not actually, it doesn't exist, right? It's respect, it's caring for the other person, it's respecting the other person, their integrity, their way of being, their values and everything, right? And going around that and making it work together, rather than, oh, I'm this, I'm better, I'm like, because that again, it's from you not loving yourself and trying to, the other person or you, right? So I think if in a perfect relationship, if you love yourself and the other person loves herself, right, then that would lead to, let's respect each other and let's build something together, right? It's not all flowers in pink and everything, because as we were talking, it's life, right? Life gets in the way, and problems, and family, and old ones are going to pass away, unfortunately, but that's part of life. So, but yeah, it is about it is about love, and it's good you point out that you're helping people in a way understanding and just giving in. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with giving in.
Yeah.
And people are afraid of that because they think I've got these aims and goals. And it's
yeah.
not to say, this is a conversation I have a lot in coaching, this isn't to say that the end of this process leads to you just being this nobody person
Yes.
who never does anything.
Yeah.
We're going to get your goals and values sorted, but before we can get to that point, like so much self-help, again, I experience this, says to guys, go and find out your values.
Yeah.
That's hard, man. That's hard. You don't just
And
work out your
confusing.
values and confusing.
Yeah.
Values are incredibly deep. They're usually related to cultural, spiritual, and social structures that are thousands of years old sometimes. And we don't even understand very often why we feel bad or good about certain things. So when you're figuring out your values, you have to take one step back, right? And this is, again, part of the exploration of the work we do. But to relate that to relationships, as you were saying, I mean, I had a really nice thing once in that, well, first of all, I guess the problem is when you don't have that center in yourself and you don't love yourself, two people rely on each other like that. And then when one leaves, the other one falls flat and then they're broken on the floor. You have to be able to stand as individuals who come together in a union. That's the aim.
Yeah.
And this guy said to me once, such a good point. He said, any relationship has 6 people in, right? There's who you think you are, there's who you are, and there's who she thinks you are. And it's the same on the other side with her.
Oh, wow, I never heard that one. Right.
So you have these conflicting things happening, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think the notion he's trying to get at is you have to be able to let go a little bit. You know, you have to not force things so much and be in your own self and be true to yourself. And that will be what holds you together for the long term.
Right.
But with regards to letting go, yeah, we have to let go for the beginning. And I think this also leads on really to the real core of the Recovering Man program and what I do, which is we let go so we can be reborn. Well, reborn into what? In some ways, I'm not quite keen on overly subscribing what that should be, because for every guy, it's dependent and life has got in store for what life has got in store for each person. However, what I'm very eager to stress at that point and what we do is we do a lot of what I call ritualistic processes. So I'm a big believer that our culture, Carl Jung wrote a lot about this, but our culture's really over the last sort of 100 years, since the Industrial Revolution and resources have become more replete and we're quite safe, we've moved away from the rituals that would have taken boys into a state of manhood.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and therefore, without those journeys, it's not to say this isn't the case for everyone. There are good fathers around, there are good role models around, but lots of men don't have that. Maybe even 50% nowadays, maybe more.
Those are huge numbers.
Exactly. And we're finding this more and more where men are finding it hard to really understand what it means within themselves. Yeah. And they're finding it hard to, well, even manufacture these processes in their own lives and find guys that they can trust, you know, that they can really think, well, this guy's got my best interests at heart. He wants to see me develop in my own way, you know. So the next step is you start from nothing, and then we try and take people on a process rather than telling them what they should do. It's like they go on a process and the answers come from within. And then within that, you're building your own character, you're building your own sense of grit, you're building your own sense of purpose and meaning. And that can take us into the more, let's say, traditional self-help areas, reframing, values, goals, all that sort of stuff.
Right. This show is on iTunes, is going to be on YouTube as well. So it's for people to watch it, to get something out of it, right? So this show is to help other people with a message that they might want to hear in a moment when they need it the most, right? So tell me, so for example, let's say the people who are listening, there is one guy who's been through the same thing, or he is actually right now, where you were when you were 17, 16, 15, right, 14. What's the first thing? What advice would you give to this guy listening right now and thinking, oh shit, I'm in the same, actually, you know, I have the same problem right now in my life. What is the first thing I should do?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, the first thing you need to do is to be connecting with people. But I want to make a caveat on that. And this is the really important point, because this is the mistake I made and what a lot of other guys make, where there's a big emphasis today that you'll see in the media around talking. So they'll say, just go and talk to people, just get it out. And there's some truth to that. There's like 50% of that's true. But if you are struggling, there's two quick things. First of all, yes, you do need to go and talk to people, but you need to do a bit of homework on who you're going to talk to, because you need to talk to the right people who've got a plan. Now, I call this the sort of empathy and action paradigm, right? So you need empathy when you first go to someone who can connect with you, who can listen to you, who can hear you non-judgmentally, but then take you on an actual plan of action. Because too much today is all empathy. It's quite feminine, actually. It's this idea that it's the great mother, just hug you and make you better, just keep talking about how sad you are. That works for a while, but life is 50, it's the masculine and feminine, the yin and yang, you need both.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the idea is that you want to be looking for people who, yes, in the first instance, they're just going to be there for you, they're going to be a friend, you're going to be able to be completely open with them and explore that, but they're not going to leave you in that space, because I see this a lot with men, where, again, happened to me, so men will open up, but then they'll find themselves just sharing and sharing and sharing. And the problem with that is that there's a power that comes when you share something for the first time. There's a raw release, almost like a spiritual, mental release, where you find a sense of energy, and you really want to push on from that. And we need to use that. You need to use that to move on to the next stage. And that next stage is actually putting your transformation into action, so actually doing things. Hence, that's the work I do. Right. But what you sometimes find is men don't take that next step, and they get lost in the talking about it phase. And this is really important. So our modern, again, it's unfair to say everyone, but let's just say the modern day, lots of people focus on talking about your feelings, which is all right in the beginning, but not long term. And they're very keen on the sort of psychotherapy angle. Psychotherapy is great, again, for a certain time. But if you're in a situation where all you do is talk about your feelings, and modern guys tend to be quite bright, they tend to have read a lot, they tend to be quite in their heads, they tend to be quite neurotic as well. So they just sit there and they spend most of the day analysing how they feel, analysing a certain situation about, oh, I feel like this about this, but then this relates to this, and what am I like with this? And I find a lot of the work I do with guys when I'm coaching, the step one stuff where we're going through their life, is they will intellectualize the process, and they're trying to psychotherapize themselves. Right. And this is the problem with sharing your feelings too much, is because you get stuck just talking about it. And this sounds very simplistic, I know, but I think it's true, that the more you focus on something, the more real it will become. It's like when you're in a car and you think, I'm going to crash, and then you see the tree, and they say, if you focus on the tree, you're going to crash into the tree. So they say, try and divert away from anything that you could crash into, look into a field. So you miss the tree and go into the field. And it's that same notion that if all you're doing is just sharing, and you're not taking the action, you haven't got that sort of masculine leadership, as I like to think about it, you can end up trapping yourself in just endless analysis and make every last little nervous thought a complete drama in your life. And then you're making it hard to get out the bloody door in the morning, because you go, oh, I've got to do this at work, and this person thinks this about me, and am I going to be able to perform in that meeting? We need to let go. We need to let go. So there's a space and time for exploration, but we need to get that action placed right. So I'd say to anyone who is really feeling like that they could benefit from life transformational stuff, is to be looking at people who you feel can listen to you and then take you on a journey. And if you can't find that, then you're going to have to manufacture it yourself, maybe with a good friend or therapy where you feel you can connect with someone, but then you might have to engage in, say, self-help development work, men's work, whatever it may well be. So you can actually unite those two forces in your own life.
Right. Oh, wow. That's good. That's really good advice. Well, I've seen you were giving the example of focusing on the tree, and then right. So I know that as self-fulfilling prophecy. What do you think about that? Do you have any? How do you see that? Do you have a couple of words about that? Because for me it's really interesting, and I kind of like, I've seen it in my life, I've seen it in other people's life, and I tend to believe it, right? I tend to believe that kind of thing, that we have the power to actually attract things, right? There's that book, The Secret. The only problem I have with that book is that it doesn't tell you have to do something.
Right, yeah.
Right? So, all cool, all well, all fine, but without actually doing something.
Yeah, you got to do the work.
It's kind of like tricky, it's not going to happen, right? So what do you think about the self-fulfilling prophecy? How do you see it in your own life?
Well, I see it as fundamentally true. I do agree that The Secret is well-intentioned, but it's a bit superficial.
Yes.
And I think you find this a lot with a lot of self-help material where they're talking about fundamental truths, but they talk about them in an overly flowery way. And there's a fundamental truth that is almost before what they're talking about. And you could take, for instance, my mentality I had before I had my own transformation, which was very much focused on I thought I could work the world out of my own head. And I didn't realize that with that, there's a presupposition that logic governs the world and there's systems and authorities and they dictate how life works. So I basically completely devoided myself of any personal agency. So I thought, well, nothing I can do is really going to have an impact, So I had to go through a transformation to realize I can have an impact. And again, that transformation first of all took me to a place beyond visualization, beyond a place of thinking this is what I want to achieve, right? I had to get to a place of neutrality to almost wipe away the old stuff. Now, once you're in that, definitely you can start focusing on things more and more, and you have to be open to opportunities. And I think it's evident that if you are focusing on anything in your life, you will by its nature bring it into being, because that is what human beings are. At our root, what we are is essentially creative beings.
Yes.
We're humans as in the human form, the body, and we're beings, human beings. And the beings are the doers. We are literally creative forces in the world.
Absolutely.
And whatever we envision, we will bring it into reality in some form or another. We might not have the bang-on perfect image of what it will be. Example in my life is to keep my business moving in the early stages. I was doing a lot of freelancing for lots of different companies, still do a bit every now and again as well, in the publishing space. And now when I was, first of all, when I started out in that space, my aim was basically, I wanted to do basically a little bit of freelancing on the side in my basically editorial capacity, and I wanted to build my own business. But as I was building my own business, I was picking up marketing skills, sales skills, event skills, which then I could apply to my other work, and that opened up a whole wealth of new work. So just by having a vision to do something, at the beginning it was like, well, you're never going to get enough clients to support yourself. How are you going to invest all this money in a business as well? But when you start doing it, you actually have a vision. Doors will open as well. So I'm not saying that I'm going to win the lottery and on Friday you're going to win it. That's not what I'm saying. It's more open yourself up to realities. And as you say, you have to actually walk it through. So there's a saying I like where, belief can move mountains, but you have to bring a shovel. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one. Because you did take action, right? It wasn't just the vision. You did take action. You had to learn the marketing stuff, right? Even though you can hire some freelancers to do some stuff for you, you still have to know what they should do. Right? What am I paying for? Right? You still have to know. You still have to control the work that's get done, right? So you did have to learn sales and you have to learn marketing, and that's I think that's the secret of getting out of your head.
Yeah, well, definitely,
right?
And also I think as well we are moving to a more entrepreneurial society. I think we are. I think with AI, a lot of roles that we're seeing nowadays can be automated. So even news writing, which a lot of my work now is overseeing news writing teams, or it was. I don't do that so much anymore. But that could be automated within 5 or 10 years.
Wow.
So you need to be a creative decision maker if you want to be in charge of where you're going in the next 5 to 10 years in your career. Now, I think it's especially important in that regard for entrepreneurs especially to be aware of how things work, which is why I invested a lot of time in marketing courses and sales courses. I even did a coding course, because I thought, I've got no idea what programs are doing.
Wow.
How do I know if they're ripping me off or not?
That's true.
So I wanted to learn, is it hard? Is it easy? When they tell me this is going to take 4 hours, is it going to take an hour and they just want to watch, I don't know, YouTube or BBC Sport Football or whatever?
Yeah.
So, yeah, basically little things like that, which is 250 quid, but you've learned about coding.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to get an understanding. You're not going to make money with it. No. It's just to get an understanding.
Yeah, and give you fluency when you're talking with other organisations, with your own teams or whatever it is, with an understanding of their role and how it relates to other people's roles.
Yeah, yes. That would be a good advice to like everyone who is too much in their head. Like, just do a course. Just take something, like just get out of your head. Get a goal, have a vision, try to understand maybe what is it that you want, and then just act, like, without having everything perfect, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think getting out of your head is really a real problem for a lot of people today.
Yeah.
Again, I think lots of people are quite bright, and that's almost the problem.
Yes.
Because we put such a value on knowledge and intelligence, but there's wisdom we kind of forgotten about, and when you can rest in yourself, that's wisdom, which isn't necessarily knowing things. It's just being at peace with yourself, which is more important. It will lead you to greater places than just pure knowledge alone,
right?
Which is good for having power in the world, but that's not necessarily going to complete you. So I'm a big believer that people do need to get out of their heads in whatever way they can. And I just say personally, being an overthinker and coming from an overthinking background, one thing that helped me massively was the gym.
Right.
The gym and Thai boxing and engaging with physical activities where you're really straining yourself and pushing yourself.
Tell me a little bit about that. What physical activities do you do? What are your hobbies? Right, so you got out of the dark, right? You got out of the dark, and now you have a life that you're happy with, right?
Yes.
You're successful, right? And it's not only about money. It's about being, feeling good with yourself, right? Loving yourself, being, like striving for something in the journey, right? Tell me a little bit about your hobbies and what do you do with your time?
Well, again, I mean, this is kind of built over the last 4 or 5 years since I've kind of had my own transformation. So I'm really lucky in the sense that everything I do kind of relates back to that core.
Right.
So everything is almost revolving around that. And again, the program I work on does break your goals down in that capacity. So even when you're in leisure time, you're still learning. And I have to be honest, I was saying this to someone the other day. They were like, what do you value the most in your week? And there really are a few pleasures for me which top being in the gym and just having a podcast on. Because the material out there now is so good.
Absolutely.
It's so high quality. You can literally listen to the best people in the world in all manner of fields, whatever it is, and just getting a sweat on and really pushing yourself. And I being involved in men's personal development, specifically men's, we have an evolutionary imperative to challenge ourselves physically. It's in our ancestry. It's in our being to actually want to be challenged and come up against something and push against it and learn and be growing. So number one, that's why I get so much from the gym. It's kind of a stress reliever, but you get a sense of meaning from it. With the podcast as well, I'm also learning. So there's sort of 3 birds with 1 stone. Then of course Thai boxing as well. I like that because it's confronting fear, which is good. I think
you do it regularly.
Once a week.
Right.
Once a week. Once a week. And it's one of these things where you would have thought that engaging in quote unquote violent activity makes you more aggressive and anxious, but it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
It takes it away because you're facing it. And again, I mean, I've done a lot of men's work. That's why I also start my own event, ideally this year, depending on coronavirus, which we'll see. But what I've done in a lot of men's work and found a lot of men's work is they'll really get you to the most fearful or angry state you can be in, and then make you face another man, look him in the eyes, and sometimes you'll be screaming at each other.
Really?
It's quite common in men's work, you find these sorts of things. And they might even get you to fight. So like actually wrestle, not full on punching each other, but wrestle.
But wrestling, right.
And you're really trying to wrestle each other to the floor. And there's something that happens in that's very primal that comes out of you. But once you've been through that situation, there's such a strong connection you have with that guy. You feel connected, you feel like friends, you feel like you've known him all your life.
Wow.
There's a tightness to it. And I think, again, it comes to that place of facing something, of getting out of your head, engaging in real activity.
Right.
And again, we seem to be stuck in the notion today that life happens purely in our minds, and we can work the world out. But life happens in action. That's what matters.
Absolutely.
It doesn't really matter what you think, you know. It's what you actually do that matters.
I'd love to try that, you know. I would love to try that, you know.
Yeah,
I've never
yeah.
done. I mean, I'm doing some jogging, you know, like things just to keep a little bit of moving, not to be. But I'm mostly on the laptop and not doing much.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think I'd love to try that.
Yeah. Well, the season's coming up. Summer's the big season.
Is it?
There's a lot in London.
Oh
yeah.
wow! Oh really?
Yeah, there's
Cool.
some good ones. They start from the very mild to the more very extreme. And if anyone is interested in it, I would recommend maybe starting on the more mile end of things, because the extreme stuff really can push you. Yeah, yeah.
Right, I'd love to try that.
Yeah.
Right, so as hobbies, first of all, the first one would be sport, like
Yeah,
just to keep you
it's more
moving.
physical challenge,
Yeah.
getting out of your head.
Yeah.
I think as well, another big one for me is music. I've always been innately musical. Obviously, wanted to be a
Singing
folk singer.
or-
Yeah, guitar, singing.
Really?
Are the two things I do. Yeah, I mean,
wow.
it's purely a hobby now.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But I think it's also something where, for me, as I get older, and also, not to blow my own trumpet too much, I'm not the best guitar player in the world, but as you improve,
Yeah.
it's really wonderful looking at top musicians and seeing how they did it, because you think, man, they're talented. They're talented. And just having that connection with something that's
Yeah,
beyond
yeah,
you,
absolutely,
you know,
yeah.
gives you an appreciation for life. And given the nature of my work, a lot of it is going to meet someone, coming back home, working in a cafe, at home doing a Skype call, at home doing a bits to camera or whatever.
Yeah.
So my little break will be picking up the guitar, strumming
is
a
it?
song. Yeah.
Oh wow,
yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
I can
nice,
see
it's
that. I
nice.
can see that. I have a friend who does guitar as well,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
more on the rock side. But that's really cool. I tried one time, but I quit. I don't know why I quit.
So what are your kind of hobbies?
So I just read a lot, man.
Yeah.
I don't have too many right now because I'm trying to set this thing up. But running in the morning, I wake up at 6:30, 6:30.
Oh, right,
Run a
okay.
little
Mike
bit, yeah.
Tyson style, you know, first thing in the morning.
Yeah, sometimes I don't feel like.
Yeah.
I just force myself.
Yes.
But just running right now. I'm thinking about like a little bit maybe boxing or you said that one, but or Thai
boxing,
or something like that. Just to give me a little bit of just get out of my head as well.
Yeah. Well, also, I would recommend kickboxing, because
Have you done it?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it?
Well, kickboxing, Thai boxing, they're usually bumped in as the same thing.
Oh
today.
right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of done kickboxing / Muay Thai.
Right.
One I go to
All right,
kind of is
how you call that? Muay Thai.
Muay Thai.
Right, that one
Yeah.
as well. Right. All right. So these three kind of like I watch how you call it? No MMA. There's a big one right now. There's a like McGregor. Where is he fighting?
UFC?
Right, man. Yeah, that one. That one. I watched that one. That's a hard.
Oh, it's
sport,
hardcore, man. It's
That's
hardcore.
really like.
I mean, there is something about UFC and boxing
I think
specifically.
UFC is crazier
Oh,
than
it's
boxing.
mad. Yeah, it is. It's way crazy.
Yeah.
Kind of, there's no padding on the gloves, that sort of thing.
I mean, in boxing, you're safe, man. I think. Well,
to an extent.
to an extent,
you
yeah,
get
right.
your
Yeah.
fatality here and there,
But UFC is like mad.
I mean, I've got to say, they're the two sports that I really admire. I've always liked sport, but I mean, I like football, but I just don't respect football like I respect boxers and UFC fighters.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again, just doing like hobbyist
Yeah.
kickboxing or whatever, one of the classes I go to, every now and again, they'll basically do 8 3-minute rounds of just hitting the bags, and you'll be ducking and weaving and hitting the bags, kicking the bags, and you are drained. You are just drained after 8 3-minute sessions. Now, boxers and UFC fighters and so forth, they have either 3 5-minute rounds or they have 12 3 minutes. And they're not only moving and hitting and dodging, you're also going to get punched in the face.
Yes.
So I just
and they
really
do
respect-
wrestling and they do like.
Exactly. Like
It's
the
like-
level of
Yeah, it's like kind of like a
discipline and-
mix of all these things, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a mix
yeah.
of like 3 or 4 disciplines, right?
Yeah,
like the one
yeah.
like how you call that one? Muay Thai.
Muay Thai,
Right, that one.
kickboxing,
Kickboxing, and then
karate, and then on the
karate.
ground you have like Brazilian
right.
jiu-jitsu and
So it's
so
like
forth.
it's a really interesting mix because you can be good at one,
Yes,
but not
yeah.
at the other ones,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, it's a good metaphor for life as well, I think,
Yeah,
when you're watching like
that's
elite
true, yeah.
sportsmen, because you're going to have strengths and other people are going to have weaknesses, and
Yeah.
sometimes you have to play to your strengths and try and take advantage of their weaknesses.
Absolutely.
But on top of that, we all have to go out there in the world in whatever capacity. You know, I did a big speaking engagement recently, and I was a bit nervous beforehand because I thought a lot of people here,
Yeah.
and they were outside of my normal sort of demographic.
Yeah.
If I'm speaking to like young men my age who get where I'm coming from, I'm in my element there. But when
Yeah.
these were like quite professional type people, executive types, and I was a little bit like, oh, you know, I'm feeling a bit nervy about this. But I was just thinking beforehand, like, this is life. You know, you got to go up and meet things, and sometimes you're going to fail, sometimes you're going to succeed.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and you look at elite sports and you think, sometimes these guys get knocked spark out. You know, it's embarrassing in front of the world. You get knocked spark out, but you got to get up. You got to get on with it. You know,
When it's not like you lose and nobody knows, right? That's like even like any sport, you know, for that matter.
Yeah.
Right. But the ones where like it's you by like when it's a team, right? You know, you lost, right? It's not you who lost, right? It's the team.
Yes.
Right. But when you lose by yourself, that's hard, man.
yeah. It's true.
That's really hard.
But I think as well, though, there's something about human nature where we like an underdog, or we like someone who's been knocked down and come back.
Yes.
Because when you think about whatever walk of life it is, whether it's someone who's made their millions, or whether it's someone who's a great boxer or a great UFC fighter, whatever it may well be, we prefer the story of the guy who lost it all.
Yes, who was
but came
not.
back.
Yes,
It's like Tyson
exactly,
Fury
exactly,
at the moment as an example. We like that story because we can relate to
Tyson
it.
Fury, yeah, that's true. Man. I've seen art from the
Exactly.
net.
It's like we relate to that story, so we shouldn't fear failure.
Yeah.
Because it's in that we learn. You become a champion when you failed. No, the guy who sort of breezes it, people don't identify with that guy.
Yeah.
You know, he might be a champion, but he's not the people's champion.
Yes.
You know?
I know that the Tyson Fury, there was like the other guy was saying that he lost because of the costume or something.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, but you put yourself in his shoes, and then you think like, you know, you have to find something, right? It's like you have to find a reason. You can't just say, you know, I just failed. You know, you have to find a reason. Because I think we all do, right? We all have to, at least, you know, not say it to the world, but at least to ourselves, you know,
Yes.
because then it's like hard to take it.
No, I mean I agree. I think you have to find the reason. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people can pretend, and
Yes.
they say they found reasons, but they're excuses.
Yeah.
And you need to find the reason, and it's in
Yeah.
that we really, you know, we have the growth.
Absolutely.
And it can be hard. It can be hard facing that about yourself. I know in my life, I turned my life around. Right, I was careering on in a bad way to one place. It wasn't going to end well, but I turned it around. But then you turn it around, but you have bad days, and you think, you start thinking that inner voice comes back. Oh, you can't do this. You know what I mean? How did you screw that up? Blah blah blah. You know, all this stuff can come back in your head, and you start listening to it. But this is the process of life. This is why you have to stay recovering, not recovered man, because you're constantly trying to
every
grow
single
and learn.
day, every single day. Tell me a little bit about what success means to you now that you're where you are.
Yeah, well, I mean, number one, I think, is inner peace. That's the biggest thing. I think everything stems from inner peace.
Yeah.
I was at this conference recently and got chatting to this guy, and they did one of these exercises where you go around the room, you set your goal, and I said inner peace, and this guy came to him and he was like, I want to have this here and this here and this here, and it's just limitless goals. The goal, this was like I was. The goals are too diffuse. You're going to confuse yourself, you know. I'm a big believer in the core meta goal, and there's just nothing better that I've experienced than when you've got a truth about who you are, accepting of your failures, accepting of your suffering, and that's in line with more of a core life purpose.
Right.
See, that's been absolutely vital for me. So that is number one in success. What is meant to follow will follow from that. Now, since I've engaged in my own business, on my own path, even as a freelancer, I've always began thinking, I'm not going to get anywhere with this, you know, those doubtful thoughts, all that sort of stuff. But I've learned to distance myself from the negativity of the mind. So I'll just crack on with it and try and stay within a place of inner peace. Not to say that I've made millions, but every year I've made more money.
Yes.
Every year new opportunities have developed just by putting myself out there. Just by being willing to say, here I am, this is my story, no holes barred.
Yes.
I'm going to work hard, I'm going to be open and honest. But I have to do that. All comes from a place of inner peace with myself. Because I remember for a long time, if I was a personal development conference or speaking to someone in any capacity and I felt they'd done more than me and were quite better than me in one field, which people always going to be better than you in one field or another.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd fear asking a question. I'm going to sound stupid. That would be my thought process.
That's a good one.
They're going to laugh at me.
That's a good one, yeah.
The coming from the place of that inner peace and not expecting all this magic from yourself, but just being content with yourself and working on honing that, you don't mind asking a question and sounding a bit stupid. And plus, 99% of the time, everyone else is thinking it anyway.
Absolutely,
You
yeah.
know, so-
I mean, you're going to learn more by sounding stupid than by just thinking, like, in yourself, right? I mean, you sound stupid, you're going to learn something.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, well, that's a good
So,
point,
that's good. About the hobbies you asked me, I forgot to tell you, cars would be like one big hobby I have.
Yeah.
Not much time for it right now, but cars would be this, right? So sports as well. I'm into sports, but cars would be my second hobby, and I think this summer is going to get a little bit bigger because I'm going to get something, which is a surprise. I'm not going to say it now.
Okay, sweet,
yes.
man. Sweet.
So I'm going to ask everyone who comes on the show, right? Just before ending it, what would be the advice you would give to the 18-year-old Richard? Like, if he was here with you and you could, talk to him and just man.
I mean, I would love to have that opportunity, man. And that, I suppose, is what I'm trying to do with my coaching work. You want to connect on that level.
Yeah.
I think I would just say everything is okay. I would start with that. Everything is okay. Let's just get to the baseline first. Because again, you can just calm someone down and give them a little bit of trust. They can take a mile from that.
Wow.
So I just like to say it's okay and there is a way. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean there isn't a way.
Absolutely.
And that is such a key lesson. Like, again, this morning I do readings every morning. It's part of Recovering Man lifestyle. I advise it to other people. Always journaling, gratitude list, reading, key content, key people who've been influences in my life. What do they think? How can I think about that? How's that helping me? What's the main thing I've got to do today? So I'm always writing these things down every morning, every evening as well. I go through like a review of the day. And the reading that I was doing this morning was basically pointing out this notion that there's more in the world than we will ever know. And you can never lose sight of that. Because when you have the tough times, your mind wants to tell you, you screwed up, you don't know the way.
Yeah.
There's always a way. And if you hang around long enough, it really is true, in my experience, the darkest hour comes before the dawn. And sometimes it's dark and you've got to just hold on, be honest, open yourself up to people around you who can help you. And there is a way. You just have to be open to it.
Cool. That's really good advice, man. That's really good advice. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? recoveringman.org, O-R-G.
Cool.
That's my
media.
website, social media. Twitter handle is recovering_man. Facebook is Recovering Man. And YouTube is also, Recovering Man channel.
Cool.
I put out a lot of content on there. Sometimes it's more personal development focused. Sometimes it's a bit more focused on finding peace within yourself, as you may have gathered from this. It's a big thing of mine.
Wow.
So a lot of it is focused.
Richard, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was an amazing talk. I love it. I love your story. I love how you came back from really hardship and problems and all this. So I love your story. Good luck to you. And thank you for coming here, brother.
Thank you, brother.
All the best.
Take
Take
care.
care.
All the best to you, man.